Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the Right Circle event organized by Prabha Khaitan Foundation. It's indeed my great pleasure to welcome each and one of you, distinguished literary enthusiasts, avid readers, to this splendid gathering. We are grateful to Oil India Limited for their valued support in making today's session possible, and also to our hospitality partner, Vivanta Guwahati. This evening is especially delightful as we come together in the company of author Chandrachur Ghose, who wears many caps in the form of an author, columnist, and public speaker on history, politics, economics, and environment. As we begin, let me just share a few words about the foundation. Prabha Khaitan Foundation actively promotes the arts and cultural exchange with an emphasis in its inclusivity and reflection. Its work brings together literature, education, performance, and conversations around gender equality with a strong focus on supporting and uplifting women. Through a wide range of thoughtfully designed initiatives such as author interactions, book launches, literary gatherings, panel discussions, and intimate festivals, along with music, dance, and theater performances, the Foundation continues to create welcoming platforms where ideas are shared, voices are heard, and creativity is celebrated. Let me now give you a brief introduction of author Chandrachur Ghose. Chandrachur Ghose is an author, columnist, and a public speaker on history, politics, economics, and environment. He graduated from Vishwa Bharati Shantiniketan and University of Sussex. He was a fellow at the Foundation of Indian Historical and Cultural Research. Ghose left his 2 decades career as an environmentalist and a business strategy consultant in 2018 to become a full-time author. His books, all of which have been national bestsellers, include Conundrum, Subhash Bose's Life and Life After Death, the definitive biography of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Bose, the Untold Story of an Inconvenient Nationalist, 1947 to 1957, India, The Birth of a Republic, and The Bose Deception. His latest book is Many Shades of Saffron, Decoding 100 Years of RSS. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
In conversation with him, we have Professor Dhurjjati Sarma. Professor Dhurjjati Sarma is an assistant professor in the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, Guwahati University. He is also an associate at the UGC Inter-University Center for Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. He translates between Assamese, English, and Hindi. He is presently working on a critical history of Assamese literature. I welcome you, Professor Sharma, to commence at the much-awaited conversation. All yours.
All right, so a very good evening to everyone. So it's a pleasure meeting you all, that also on a working day evening. I know how difficult it is to manage time after your work and coming here to listen to us talking. So welcome you all, and welcome, Mr. Ghose.
Thank you.
And all right, you have been introduced, and obviously the audience here have always been admiring your work. That's why they're here. And I'm very sure that this conversation is going to make things more complicated for them as far as their understanding is concerned, because the topics that you have been dealing with are actually quite thought-provoking, right? And on a personal note, well, exactly a month ago, on the 17th of January 2026, I attended a book signing event of Trustee, the latest novel by Amitabh Ghosh, exactly a month ago in Goa. So that was 17th of January. So 17th of February, I'm here conversing with another Ghosh. Both the Ghoshes are pride of Bengal, and they're working on areas equally complicated, equally thought-provoking, and I guess equally, having repercussions on certain issues which have massive bearing on our present-day lifestyle, present-day living, present-day thought processes. And, now here is a bit of a happy contradiction that Mr. Ghosh has written extensively on Netaji, but today we are talking about a book which is not directly bearing on Netaji, but obviously it's a consequence of a trajectory of his continued engagement with the political climate of the middle decades of the 20th century. So I begin with the topic you like most, on the 3 books on Ghosh on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose that you've written. And all right, you call him an inconvenient nationalist. So I want you to sort of understand why Bose was an inconvenient person. I'm saying this because if you read this book, you will find that yes, there were tussles, there were disagreements between different nationalists, between Sardar Patel, between Nehru, between Gandhi, and somehow they all somewhat came together on certain occasions, right? But Netaji was really uncompromising. So on that note, he was inconvenient. He was also, quote unquote, a threat. So I want you to take us through that journey and tell us, why do you think he was inconvenient for what? Inconvenient for whom? And inconvenient at what cost? Over to you.
Thank you, Professor. It's you always know when you talk to a professor that it's never an easy conversation. You always you have to be on the defensive. They come well prepared. They're well articulated, cogent thoughts, critical questions, and but anyway, I will try to answer your question to the best of my capability. But first of all, thank you very much for coming over in the evening on a weekday. And thanks to Prabha Khaitan Foundation, to Anindita for getting me here. I love coming to Guwahati, and fortunately I got the opportunity to go to Dibrugarh also this time. So that was an added advantage. Now coming to your question as to, why inconvenient? He was inconvenient, which in one word you explained very well, but I'll elucidate that he was uncompromising. And everybody had soft spots. Everybody else had soft spots where they would step back from their stated goals, their stated principles, which Bose would not. He would not compromise with his ideals, with his goals. That was the central point of it. Now, what happens is when he set his goal for independence of India, there was no looking back. There was no sidestepping. That became the only goal. No negotiation, nothing. So no giving space to the British Raj for talks and everything, soft pedaling, stepping back, even though strategic and all. So when he follows this approach, completely uncompromising approach, from the very beginning of his career, he gets into a clash with Gandhiji. That at the very beginning of his career. Now Gandhiji had his team, the Gandhian coterie, the high command, whatever name you might like to use. And getting into a clash with Gandhiji meant getting into a clash with almost all of them. So when I say team, there were people like Sardar Patel, who was Gandhiji's organization man, right-hand man. He would ensure that Congress remains within the control of Gandhian principles and Gandhiji's command. And nothing goes outside Gandhian line. He would keep a very tight control. There were ideologues like Chakravarti Rajagopalachari, who were in soul, in spirit, perhaps more Gandhian than Gandhiji himself. There were people like Pattavisita Ramaiah, who in the early years was not so significant, but later on became quite a big leader. Then there were others who belonged to that group. So they obviously took an adversarial position to Bose. And they clashed on various points, on the nature of campaign, on the timing of campaign, what we are going to ask for, whether we are going to ask for complete independence or are we going to negotiate for India's dominion status. So also all these, and then not being averse to taking an path of armed revolution, mass uprising with the help of armed revolution, and organizing students and youth to that end. So all these were not liked by the Gandhians and all. So if this was the point of contrast and clash with the Gandhians, he was working with the students and the labor, the youth, which were the core constituency of the communists. And the communists did not like that. They felt that he was overstepping. He was getting into their zone of influence. So they tried to work together for some time, but eventually they had to part ways, and in quite a bitter manner. Then there was the conventional, the traditional and the conservative right wing, the Hindu Mahasabha and others, who focused more on the community and the communal issues, with which he did not agree at that time. He said that, we need to think about the nation's freedom first. We can settle the internal points of conflict later on. So let's not just focus on one community right now. And the same principle applied to Muslim League also. So, gradually as his political career progressed and as he became more and more popular, and his stature almost reached that of competing with Gandhiji's, at the same stature almost, because we have to remember that he is the only political leader in India's history who handed over an electoral defeat to Gandhiji. Nobody has been able to give an electoral defeat to Gandhiji. So that has been such a sore point for the Congress party that they still haven't been able to get over that yet. So that part was there. So everywhere he did not build a constituency for himself. So today, if you see leaders like, say, Ambedkar has a constituency of its own. Gandhiji has a constituency of his own. Pandit Nehru has a constituency in terms of the Congress party. So everybody has a constituency. Bose did not build a constituency for himself. He had a wide support, mass popularity, but it was always diffused. And you know the English proverb that what belongs to everybody belongs to nobody. So he belonged to everybody. So he did not belong to anybody specific. Nobody claimed him. Everybody wanted to use his image after independence in whatever way suited their political convenience or the political program. But we see at the fag end of his political career in India in 1939 and 40. So we see the Congress against him. We see the Hindu Mahasabha against him, the Muslim League against him, the communists against him, the Congress Socialist Party against him. So Jayaprakash Narayan also went against him. Jayaprakash Narayan realized his mistake. Probably he was the only person to realize his mistake and write a letter admitting his mistake. That I was wrong in assessing you, I was wrong in the assessment of your program, but I have realized that what you were saying is right, let's work together. But when the letter reached Bose, he was already on his way to Germany. So that made him inconvenient. That was a starting point. And after that, he has remained that way only.
And also in terms of his philosophy, if we take Gandhi, Nehru and others, which are more means-centric. They were more focused on the way the goal should be reached. But I guess Subhash Chandra Bose was more centered towards the goal. That this is what we need to achieve, this is what we need to do, and we are ready to do whatever it requires for that goal to be reached.
Absolutely.
So that, I guess his uncompromising attitude emerged from that resilience. being, bloody, bold and resolute, right?
He gave that slogan, actually, this is a very interesting coincidence. In 1939, in his second year of Congress presidency, he gave the slogan that India must think of her own interest first. That slogan was kind of paraphrased and came back to Indian politics in 2014 as the slogan of India first. It was shortened, but the spirit was the same. Nobody used that slogan in all these intervening 7 or 8 decades. So India first it was coined in 1939 by him. That whatever you are doing, we will do whatever, as you said, we will do whatever is required to gain our own independence. Their morality has no place there. What matters is our freedom.
All right, we talked about the past, so let me come back to the present and nature of the activities undertaken by you. You have declassified close to 10,000 pages?
That was only one of them.
All right.
But in 3 or 4 phases, we have 2,300 files.
2,000. All right. So could you just tell us something more about that endeavor? And also the next question is, how do you think those documents will enable newer perspectives on both as a topic of study, as a topic of research? How do you think those documents are going to, in whatever way possible, within permissible limits, can you tell us what is the future of that particular corpus that you have unearthed from obscurity?
Yeah, it starts with, it follows your first question about him being the inconvenient nationalist. So because he was inconvenient, almost everything about him was kept secret in Free India. How inconvenient was he, or how much was he marginalized? One indicator is sufficient to explain the whole thing to you. So when the time of transfer of power comes, towards that time, by the end of 1946, we had Gandhiji's portrait in the Central Assembly, which later on became the Parliament. His portrait was hung there, and Netaji's portrait came into our Parliament 30 years after independence. It took the government of India 30 years to put his portrait, and that also by a non-Congress government. When Morarji Desai became the Prime Minister, he put his portrait up there. So that one indicator is sufficient. When Indira Gandhi prepared a time capsule to capture India's history, if everything gets destroyed, you know that the concept that there is a catastrophe or some nuclear attack and everything gets destroyed, the history should be kept somewhere. So it was dug underground and all. So time capsule she prepared. Bose's name was missing from there. So everybody was there, Bose was not there. So, I mean, you can go on, I can go on giving you examples, but that was the extent of marginalization. So when we started work, the starting point was the completion of the work of a commission of inquiry, which was set up under the orders of the Kolkata High Court, that to bring a closure to this vexing question that what happened to him. For so many decades, people have been just wondering, asking, but never getting the proper answer, the real answer with facts and evidences. Nothing, there was always speculation because nobody was ever satisfied. There were a number of inquiries, but nobody was ever satisfied. Everybody could see through that it's a facade, it's a game being played on, and the real questions, real issues are being sidestepped. Somehow the agenda is set even before a commission of inquiry starts its work, and so nobody could accept. So the High Court saw into it. And the funny part is that the government of India itself admitted in front of the High Court, the government's own lawyer, when they appeared in the High Court, they said that all the previous inquiries and everything, they are full of loopholes, we cannot accept them. Now, when the commission worked for 6 years and reached a conclusion that the traditional story of Netaji's death in the plane crash was a hoax, there was no truth to it, the government rejected the report, by taking a 180-degree turnaround and saying, no, the earlier reports are much more fact-based, they are truer, so we can't accept this report which has been submitted after like 6 decades, 7 decades after the incident, so we have to trust the older reports. So in front of the court, in front of the commission, when the arguments were going on, the government says, no, we don't trust the old reports. And when the report comes, they reject it on the basis that we have to trust the old report. So you don't know what they're saying. So at that point, a few of us friends, we were, there was no Facebook, no Twitter, no Insta at that time.
When was that?
This, I'm talking about 2004-05. And those who were on internet at that time would remember this Google group mails, Yahoo group mails, and Messenger, Yahoo Messenger, and those were the most fascinating stuff at that time. So we got into those group mails and used to discuss, youngsters across the world, Indians living in the US, in Europe. I was myself in UK at that time, friends in India, Australia, all places around the world. We were having hot debates and discussions as to what might have happened, what can be done and all. So when the government rejected the report like that, the question that was plaguing me was that what can be done? Because the issue was killed. Issue was absolutely done and dusted and swept under the carpet. There was no chance of it being revived ever again. It was gone forever. But we could see that, the truth was being covered up. There was enough evidence. So, luckily, in 2005, the government, the UPA government, which had just come to power, they introduced a law. There was, our government loves to copy laws from outside and somehow make some cosmetic changes and introduce them in our country. So, one such law was the Right to Information Act, which was in imitation of the Freedom of Information Act, which you find in all the liberal democracies, Western democracies. So they have a culture of transparency, they have built up a culture of transparency. But the law was brought in to introduce transparency in administration, because the accusation, it was a path-changing law. So no doubt about that. I'm saying that it was imitation of this thing, but it was a good thing to do. It was one of the most, momentous laws to have ever introduced in our country. It empowered the common man to ask questions. That was very, very important at that time. But the idea was to empower the common person, the common citizen, to ask about funds being utilized to build drains, public toilets, or municipal budgets, about all that. So the thought that came to my mind is that if a transparency law can be used for administration, for governance, why can't we use the same law to bring transparency to all the historical facts which have been suppressed and kept secret? So then we started the campaign. We formed a small pressure group, 4 or 5 of us. Named it Mission Netaji, a catchy name, and it caught on. And then we started this transparency campaign. And we went after all the ministries and departments, badgering them with questions, and asking for information, asking for documents. And every time there was a denial. Before the denial, first cause of denial, when I mentioned this culture of transparency for a reason. You know what happens when there is no culture of transparency? Because in our country, the culture is exactly the opposite. Sab daba ke rakho. The people don't need to know anything. You don't have to say anything. So the Right to Information Act very clearly said that any information, any government document, which is more than 20 years old, must be declassified and sent to the archives so that the common people can access it, researchers can access it. That is a very clear clause in the law. Now, as an undersecretary, an IAS officer, he responded to our first application saying that the information that you have asked is more than 20 years old, so we cannot give it to you. So he couldn't even understand what the RTI law RTI Act clause said that it is mandatory to give out all information older than 20 years. They understood that anything beyond 20 years, they don't have to give. So that is what the culture of transparency meant at that time. So we kept on fighting. We got a lot of support from the Central Information Commission, from the State Information Commissions, and institutionally there was a lot of support in our campaign. So we managed for the first time to get about 91 documents declassified in 2007. Now, let me tell you, a lot of people think that ये तो history है. You know, I mean, why are you wasting time on historical issues? This is past. Whatever is gone is gone. Just let it be. I mean, who bothers? Look into the future. Why are you hanging on to what happened 60 years ago? So when the Central Information Commission ordered the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Government of India, we had asked for 202 documents. The government decided, 5 people in the government decided that they will not give 202 documents, they will give only 91. And who were those 5 people? Those 5 people were a member of a committee called Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs. Now, who are the members of Cabinet Committee on Political Affairs who sat in 2007 and decided that documents belonging to 1940s, 50s, 60s cannot be given out. Documents relating to a man who has died in 1945 cannot be released. These 5 people were the Prime Minister, the Home Minister, the Minister of External Affairs, the Defense Minister, the Finance Minister. So the 5 most powerful people sat across the table in a room in 2007 and they stopped the implementation of the CIC's order. So that's for whoever claims that we are talking about history. No, we are not talking about history. We are talking about politics which flows into this day. I forgot what your question was. I just kept rambling.
No, just wanted to know within permissible limits, what are the nature of those documents which you finally managed to declassify and the impact that it could have on the image of, on correcting the distorted image of Netaji, which has been perpetuating for all these decades. I want to know about the specific nature of those documents per se.
Yeah, that's an important point. See, what happens is when we started, when we were working on this transparency campaign, our idea, the starting point was that only his disappearance issue is a mystery which has been kept secret. But as I kept digging into the files and other literature available, I realized that files relating to his life were also missing. His life itself was a mystery. To give you an example, to establish my argument in giving a small piece of statistics, Subhash Bose was active in public life in India and abroad till the end of the Second World War, 1921 to 1945. So 25 years. If I take those 25 years and compare the information available from collected works or selected works of Gandhiji, of Pandit Nehru, and Subhash Bose. These are collected works for these 25 years. The number of printed pages for Gandhi's collected works are 30,000. For Pandit Nehru, it is close to 10,000. For Subhash Bose, it is 3,000. That itself tells you how little we know about him. Because he was equally active, he was equally qualified, and he was he was touring the country ceaselessly. He was sent to exile twice for 6 years, perhaps the only politician to have been kept out of the country twice in that manner, to be exiled for 6 years. But he was constantly writing letters, writing speeches, giving speeches, writing articles, talking to the press and So where is all those? That is the basic question. Why only 3,000 pages? Where is the remaining stuff? So that led me to do a separate research on his life, his activities, reach out to libraries across the world, to private collectors, to government files. So we got files declassified not only from the government of India, we got files declassified from the US, from the CIA, from Germany, from Australia, from Taiwan, from UK. So we have got files declassified. We have fought with other governments to get files declassified. They don't do it easily because the government of India's first response always is, and this came in the form of a letter from the Home Secretary. The Home Secretary is the second most powerful bureaucrat in the country. So he wrote to the Central Information Commission that if we release files related to Netaji, there will be a serious law and order situation across the country, and there will be riots in Bengal. So we will not release these documents. So our fight continued. And then step by step, we went on, and then reached the peak in 2015-16 when the BJP came to power, and Prime Minister Modi, he announced that they will, his government will declassify all documents related to Netaji. So we were hopeful that the government would seriously actually do that, declassify. So they have declassified all files related to the civilian departments. So Ministry of Home Affairs, Cabinet Secretariat, Ministry of External Affairs, the other civilian ministries and all. But the most important and the critical files would have the actual information, the intelligence files, IB, RNAW, military intelligence, the special branch and the crime branches of the state governments. We know that they hold files. We have, I mean, the beauty of government files is that every file is cross-referenced. So once one Babu or a political leader writes a letter, you will find a reference in another file. And if you find the file where the reference is there, but the original file which contains the letter is not there, then you know that somebody is hiding something. So we got all these files out, 2,300 files, which amounts to something like 50,000-60,000 pages. Read each one of them, each page, each paragraph, each line. And then when the government was not ready to change its stance, but said that we would welcome any new input, new information, and if there is new input, then we will reconsider our position. So then we wrote Bose Deception in 2024 to demonstrate that you don't need to go to any other country asking for their intelligence files, because people were clamoring that go to Japan, go to Russia, ask for their intelligence files, they will have the information. No, the government of India has all the information, which clearly establishes that this story of Netaji's death in the plane crash is a hoax. So we demonstrated that it is your file. We have not gone into any speculation. We have not given our opinion. We have put information to show how consistently for 80 years the government of India has methodically suppressed the truth, knowing the truth. The government always knew the truth. From the first day they knew the truth. And it continued to suppress it for 8 years while spying on Netaji's family and associates and keeping a tab. I mean, the amount of intelligence resources that was deployed across the country, wherever there was a rumor that some sadhu, and there were many rumors, that some sadhu is there, he is Netaji, some sadhu is
Gumnami
there.
Babu.
No, Gumnami Baba is a final, I mean, that's the icing on the cake. But before that, there were many. I mean, I will give you one funny story which came from a place called Shivpur Kallan in Madhya Pradesh. So in the 70s, there was a commission working again on this topic, and some villagers came from this Shivpur Kallan, and they said that we have information, we know where Netaji is. So the judge asked them, so tell us what it is. They said that, you know, in our village, there was a helicopter crash. There was a chopper crash. There were, other than the pilot, there were 2 passengers. And when the chopper crashed, they were not harmed. There were minor injuries, but they were not harmed. They were okay. And they came out. They came out of the chopper. Now, who were these passengers? The first passenger who came out in complete military uniform was Adolf Hitler. And the second person who came out in sadhu's garb was Netaji. So these kind of stories. Somebody saw him in Patna railway station in 1946. ऐसे ही घूम रहे थे, मतलब साधु बन के ऐसे ही घूम रहे थे. So, all these kind of stories were always floating around, and people did not know what is the truth, where the truth is, what is fact, what is just idea, just speculation and fantasy. And deliberately, a lot of stories were floated to confuse people. So, then it becomes easier to rubbish everything. You put them in one basket and rubbish everything. So, you throw the baby with the bathwater. These files, with the help of these files, we clearly demarcated where the truth is, where fantasy was, where speculation was, and demonstrated that the government has always known what the truth is and it has suppressed it. And the government is silent.
All right, so now let us move from Netaji to this book. Well, tell us, if we sort of kind of document your corpus, we see this book is somehow sandwiched between like 3 books of Netaji. So what was the rationale, or was it like you came across certain different sets of information while researching on Netaji, or what was the genesis of this book? Why a book on the birth of a republic?
Actually, this book is very much linked to my research on Netaji, because one question that I was trying to understand was, how could the government of independent India keep such a big secret, and why? Now, to understand the why, you have to understand India's domestic politics, India's foreign relations, institutional setup, how the bureaucracy was shaped up, how the armed force is shaped up after independence, what were the promises made before independence, and how they were completely junked, sacrificed after transfer of power. So 3 big turnarounds, 3 big U-turns which the Congress made at the time of transfer of power. The first was that the creed of Purna Swaraj, complete independence, was thrown away. That we will not accept dominion status. That was the creed till August 1945. And then everything in a rush, which Gandhiji admitted, Gandhiji himself said that all our leaders are tired old men. They don't want to go to prison again. They don't have the stamina to build up another campaign, another fight, and they are hungering for power. These are Gandhiji's words.
Yes.
And he wanted to dismantle Congress and reconstruct it. I don't think that was a good idea. I don't agree with Gandhiji's proposal on that Congress should be dismantled, because there are other things. But he thought so, that it should be. Because he was very, very annoyed with all the complaints of corruption that were coming to him at that time. At the very early stage, when the interim government was functioning, when provinces had just had the Congress governments and everywhere, the number of corruption cases that were being reported is mind-boggling at that time. So that was the first U-turn, that from complete independence to dominion status, for the sake of quick transfer of power. But let us get the power. The second U-turn was delinking from the British Raj, from the British Empire. So the idea was we would never join the Commonwealth. Pandit Nehru went to London, signed the documents in consultation with Sardar Patel. Between them, they decided that India is going to join the Commonwealth. To satisfy or to pacify the opposition, the name British was removed, so it just became Commonwealth.
Yes.
But then the decision was handed over to the Constituent Assembly. The Constituent Assembly was in session. But that was, the members of the Constituent Assembly were not consulted before signing the dotted lines. The decision was handed over, that I have signed it, now ratify it. Second U-turn. Third U-turn was partition. That the country will be divided over my dead body. But finally, they could not manage, they could not contain the bloodshed, the communal hatred, the communal outbursts everywhere. They thought it better to give up and accepted partition. Panditji tried to sugarcoat it. They said that India has not been. That's very funny actually. He said, these are his words. He said, India has not been partitioned. Only some areas have seceded from India. Okay, fine. I mean, you can.
There's a hope that it's going to reunify very soon.
Everybody,
It's a
all
very
Congress
temporary
leaders
thing.
believe
Yes.
that India will be reunited within
Right.
6 months, at the
Yes.
most 1 year.
And also, going through this book, it's not just about Gandhi, but also some of this, I would term them as underrated actors in the whole way independence came about. One is Wavell, the viceroy, and also Mountbatten, because Wavell had written in one of his letters that unless we act sane on going out ourselves, I'm just paraphrasing, we'll be driven out. So he had warned Churchill. He wrote letters to Churchill, and obviously he said, obviously, it's the 11th hour now. We need to redress the situation because things will go out of hand. So Wavell had the sense, the foresight that things were not turning out as expected. So this is something that your book tries to sort of bring about.
Yeah, because I found that, he has not been given enough credit
Yes.
for setting the ball rolling. It was
Correct.
Wavell as the viceroy who started pressurizing the British government, Churchill himself, that, see, the war is going to end. What happens when the war ends? Our armed forces, all these Indians will come back to the country. They will have to be decommissioned. They will go back to their villages. They will have no more earning, no more jobs. So there will be anyway economic problem. The industry which has been created, built up to support the war effort, a lot of that industry will be closed down. People will lose jobs. There will be no money. This is going to create so much distress throughout the country that Congress will capitalize on this. And when Congress capitalizes on this, we will not be able to manage it. So let us start the process right now, the process of exit. Let us think of how to do it methodically. Transfer power to the Indians. That was Wavell's argument. It didn't work. Churchill's response was, why are you talking about Gandhi? Gandhi was released from the jail. He said, our doctor checked his health and he assured that the status of his health is such that he will never be able to participate in politics again. So why is Gandhi even coming into the equation? So he was annoyed with Wavell. Why are you even exchanging letters with him? So Wavell changed tack. He said, look, India is a matter of prestige for us. Now, if we lose India in a bitter conflict, that will kind of damage our reputation in the whole Commonwealth. British Empire's reputation will suffer. So let us do it very gracefully, hand over power to the Indians, and then it will help us. India will join the Commonwealth and we will see what to be done next. Didn't work. So Wavell actually tried his best to set the ball rolling, and it was because of his efforts that just before the elections were held in 1945, end of 1945, in 46 when the Labour government actually came to power, just before that, Churchill agreed to hold two summits, two conferences in Shimla, which failed for other reasons. But then Attlee came and he found that the process has been started. It was easier for him. But Wavell has not been given enough credit for his efforts.
It was evident, and also the sources that you quoted from, and it actually evinced the point that, and again, talking about Mountbatten, because we talk about Sardarji's contribution in bringing the princely states under control, but obviously Mountbatten had also done a lot in terms of enforcing that, and also, drafting that instruments of accession, and also making sure that apart from Hyderabad, Kashmir, and I guess one more state, rest of the states actually, they came together. Yeah. And also, you mentioned another important point in the course of your book, vis-a-vis Clement Attlee's statement regarding Gandhi. He was asked about how influential was Gandhi in getting India's independence. And Clement Attlee wrote it was very minimal.
It was minimal. So, to understand that setting, when, as a reaction, the British Raj had been promising dominion status to India from 1917, from the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms years, 1917, that in right time, Indians will get self-government and we will hand over as much power as possible, but India will remain within the empire and it will have a dominion status. Now, in 1945, when the negotiation started, the goal was still in dominion status. The goal was not complete independence. Power would be handed over to Indians, meant that India will form a constituent assembly, it will deliberate on the new form of constitution. But when were the Britishers going to leave? There was no word on it. Complete silence. Nobody knew whether they were going to leave at all or not. Because nobody promised that we are going to go away. They said India will have self-governance but within the empire, which basically meant the king or the queen, the viceroy and the British cabinet would have the final say on Indian affairs. But within the Commonwealth, India would have autonomy and self-government and all those things. Now, as a reaction to the trial of the INA soldiers, we were being brought back to India from August-September 1945. There was a volcanic eruption throughout the country. Nobody organized it. It was completely self-generated. From Northwest Frontier Province, Sindh, till the south of the country to the eastern part of the country was up in arms and there were fires everywhere. Congress used it very nicely for the electoral purpose, to get the maximum seats. And when using the INA's movement, and pro-INA movement, they promised that when India gains independence, the INA soldiers would form the core of the Indian army, Free Indian Army. When India becomes free and its army is rebuilt, INA soldiers would form the core of the army. But as soon as transfer of power happened, they were completely booted out. They were told that we will not take you, forget about forming the core of the army. You are not even going to get inside the army. You will not be recruited back. So that was one thing. But when all this was going on, first the revolt in the Royal Indian Air Force, then the rebellion in the Royal Indian Navy, then posts and telegraph, then railways, and simultaneously the student movements all throughout the country. And as the final, the nail in the coffin was the rebellion in the Jabalpur cantonment. Unthinkable. The Indian soldiers in the British Indian Army started sending money to the families of the INA soldiers. They started sympathizing, and the government realized that the only institution which had held India together for the empire was the army. The army had completely gone out of control. They could not control. Attlee sent a team of 10 MPs to do a ground level survey in January 1946. They stayed here, roamed around the country for a month and a half, then went back. And in February, I remember the date clearly because it was, they met Attlee the day before Valentine's Day, 13th February. So they met Attlee and said that, see, we have two options in front of us. Either we leave the country on our own, or we should be ready to be kicked out. So you decide which one you want. The panic reached to an extent where the commander-in-chief of the Indian Army prepared an emergency exit plan that if the situation arises, the VIPs, all the administrators and the top bureaucrats could be vacated, could be moved away from India within 2 days. So 2 such emergency plans were prepared. Such was the panic. Leaders like Pandit Nehru, Sardar Patel were spitting fire. They were attacking the bureaucrats, Indian bureaucrats, as collaborators. When we come to power, we will take stock and we will take care of you. We will see where you go. You have been working with the empire. This was the 4th U-turn. When they came to power, this same set of people whom they were threatening they became the biggest pillar of support. So, I mean, it's a story, as you go step by step, as you uncover layer by layer, you have to be amazed.
It's more complicated. The plot thickens every moment. Well, we have a lot to, I would have a lot of things to ask you, but obviously, looking at the time, maybe I'll limit myself to a few. Well, in this book, there is a very amazing chapter on how the framing of the Constitution came about. And there's a quote from Ambedkar, which, with your permission, I would like to read out. And I feel that quote is very visionary. And he said, what will be the ideal of the Constitution? He said that the working of a Constitution does not depend wholly upon the nature of the Constitution. It depends on the factors on which the working of the organs of the state will depend are the people and the political parties they will set up as their instruments to carry out their wishes and their politics. How the very working of the Constitution will be contingent upon the way the political parties and the people envision it to be. And I find this is very visionary, and I find this is something that needs to be looked deeper, and his vision of how the Constitution should be, representing the varied aspirations of the people. So how do you think, that vision has been transformed, or how do you think his thought process actually and also he was very adamant about certain changes, because during those debates, there were also discussions on the preamble. And he was very categorical about defending every word in the preamble, why every word was chosen, why democratic, why independent, why not independent but democratic. He has very extensively researched on that. So could you please tell us something on that dynamic?
See, one thing which stands out in framing the Constitution, I mean, regardless of ideological differences and everything, is the quality of the political leaders. They were thinkers, they were philosophers, they were highly qualified people. I personally believe that extracts from the Constituent Assembly debate should be made mandatory study for students in the high school. From the high school, they should read and try to understand that there was a time when we had that caliber of political leadership in the country, who were not thinking of the next election and sticking onto their chairs, but were thinking about the country in the next 50 years, next 100 years. They were thinking about principles. They were fighting with each other bitterly inside the parliament on matters of principle, on matters of ideology. Yet they were working together to the same goal. Once everything was agreed upon, they got down to working the Constitution. So a question that, it should be put into the minds of the students is that how come that we have come down, which actually shows the strength of Ambedkar's quote, which you just read out, that we have a constitution. There have been several criticisms that it is copied from here, copied from there. Bulk of it is from the Government of India Act 1935, no originality and all. So Ambedkar very cogently, very patiently answered those questions on the floor of the Constituent Assembly. There was nothing new to be added. There were principles, and we got the best of the stuff and put them together. Now, as he said, that even if you give the best tool in the hands of an inexperienced or incompetent person, he will make a mess out of it. It does not guarantee success. But even a mediocre tool and a great skilled technician, he will manage to do the job well. So there are nuances. So in an era, we live in an era where everything is in binary. Good, bad, black, white. It's not like that. Okay, fine. In TV studio, you have to prove your case in the 90 seconds, so you can talk like that. But when you are talking to a wider group of people, time is not a constraint and your immediate interest is not a constraint. We need forums where you come out. We don't need people, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. We need people who are, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. We need people who are, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 60 minutes, 70 minutes, 80 minutes, 90 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. We need people who are, 100 minutes, 200 minutes, 300 minutes. attacking others on a personal level, where we have, I don't even want to get there, what kind of people have got into politics and have occupied positions of power. So, I mean, we have had a long history and different kinds. We have seen the highs and we have seen the lows. So, all that is there. But the Constitution, as it was framed, debated each and every possible aspect of governance that could emerge, and they addressed to the best of their capability. It was an honest, sincere effort of the best kind of men that we had, political men that we had at that time.
Right. So maybe the last question before we open up. Yeah. So this book sort of ends with two issues which sort of were actually emerging at that point of time. One was the Kashmir issue and the Naga question, right? And you end with that particular thing that the Northeast, the issue is still not resolved.
I've called the chapter Seeds of Disruption.
Yes.
So it's the starting.
Something, yeah, that just raised their heads. And this was 1957. So over the last, close to 70 years, the issues have obviously taken certain positive turns in the last few years. So how do you see your book, maybe a new book, another from that? Maybe a sequel to this? So how do you envision this journey ahead? From this book, because your book stops at a point, but then it's always a journey ahead, looking into the present and also visions for the future. So how do you
see? The answer to this question is also a point which I would like to state to explain why I wrote this book. Why the first 10 years only? I mean, it might sound very arbitrary. The 10 years, why 10 years? Why not 15 years? The country that we live in today, the situation, everything, bureaucracy, armed forces, institutions as they have come up, we might feel lost in the complicated surroundings, the political atmosphere, political environment. But what I have tried to show through this book is that we are still in that decade. The foundation was laid in those first 10 years. The spirit, the worldview, the institutional framework, the underlying principles of the institutional framework, to the extent that how senior bureaucrats or bureaucrats in the ministries write letters to this day, official letters, even the language, the openings, everything remains unchanged. So we might think that, a lot has changed in India, and that is true, a lot has changed. But the first Nehruvian decade is so inbuilt, so much more than we can imagine, that anybody who believes that we have outgrown the Nehruvian years and Nehruvian mindset and Nehruvian institutional framework is living in a fantasy land. You have to critically analyze the institutions and the narratives which have been built from this period, which continues to this day in most of the areas. So unless you understand the first 10 years, how the politics work, how institutions were built, how the bureaucracy was set up, what were the thought processes behind it, what were the points of conflict between the center and the states, the aspirations of the different provinces, politicians, how the Congress was split to give birth to actual political parties and different ideologies, how they collaborated, how they fought against each other. Everything happened within those first 10 years, which continues just maybe in an altered format in our times. But unless you understand 47 to 57, you will not be able to completely comprehend where we live today.
Absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Ghosh. So I've taken about 45 minutes for this discussion. Now, maybe we have another 10, 15 minutes for very short and pertinent questions from the learned audience. So it's open for your questions, comments, and observations.
Netaji was there during emergency, right?
You need this?
Yes, but I mean, the way you put that question, a lot of people will be shocked.
No, I'm saying that, do you have any documents about his view on emergency?
Lots. And we have included quite a bit in Conundrum. What he thought about emergency and the actions of the government, particularly the treatment of Jayaprakash Narayan. He was very fond of Jayaprakash Narayan, and he was quite saddened by the way he was treated and everything. But he had very definitive views, very, very critical and very strong views.
So, and with JP Narayan and his interaction and all that, anything? Because
there was no interaction later on. I mean, JP was not involved in this. He was not aware of this existence.
He was not aware.
So I was wondering, to tie the two bits that you talked about, that decade, 47 to 57, how do you think this decade would have been different if Netaji had been given that scope to have more of a say, a more prominent position? So yes, I would like to understand more about this decade in relation to Netaji's more of a voice, if he had.
See, it depends on a lot on the entry point. When do you want Netaji back in India? If he came back in end of 45, that would set into play a different chain of reactions. If he came back in 1950, that the reactions would be significantly different. So let's say if he came back in 45 or 46, one thing that would have happened for certain is, if I take the reaction to the trial of the INA soldiers as an indicator, if the trial of the soldiers could evince that kind of reaction across the country, length and breadth of the country, just imagine the reaction which Netaji's presence would have elicited from the country. It would have completely gone out of control. Nobody had the power to control. Secondly, his stature at that time towered above everybody else. Third thing, he had, putting aside the political and the independence part and the British Raj part, he actually could demonstrate the possibility of nationalism over communal interests. The Azadin government and the INA was a living example of how you could overcome the communal conflict clashes and get every community together. Everybody else talked about it. Not a single politician could implement that. So despite their strong dislike for Bose, the Congress leadership had to keep chanting his name. Look at what he has done. Look at, if INA could have done it, why can't we do it? Let us follow his model. So they kept chanting his name, but they could not. So yesterday I was recounting this incident, this example in Dibrugarh. So if we want to take an indicator, say Mujibur Rahman, the first Prime Minister of Bangladesh, he was quite a prominent leader of Muslim League at that time. And he was an avid listener of Netaji's broadcast from Europe and Southeast Asia. So in his unfinished biography, Mujibur Rahman writes that when I used to listen to the broadcasts, my blood used to boil, that when is he coming back? Because the day he comes back, re-enters India, we will all join and India will be free in no time. But at the same time, I used to be worried that, but if he comes, then Pakistan will not materialize. So that was a very real dilemma, even in the minds of the Muslim League leaders the Muslim leaders who had settled for Pakistan already. So it's a big question mark. I personally believe that partition would have been avoided had Netaji come back at the end of 1945 or even in 1946. The third point is Mountbatten would have found no entry back into India. Now Mountbatten and Nehru's friendship and all, I don't want to get into that. There is a very well-known thing and a lot of things have happened. It's not only at the frivolous level. There are serious problems, not only at that time but in subsequent years of Nehru's prime ministership, where I have seen letters where if it happens today, there will be an explosion. That Nehru writing about India's military strategy, acquisition of military equipment, submarines and all, discussing it with Edwina Mountbatten, where Edwina Mountbatten is a non-entity. As a prime minister of a country, it's a breach of privilege. You cannot divulge such important sensitive state secrets with a person who has no stake. Her husband might be a military advisor individually to you, but then, I mean, that does not give you the license to divulge the country's military affairs to her. So that apart from all these things, as intense Nehru's friendship with Mountbatten was, equally intense was Netaji's enmity with Mountbatten. So Mountbatten's fame was that he was very well known and qualified for amphibian warfare, so land warfare and sea warfare. So he was known for amphibian war, and it is not very well known in India. Netaji had given him a title. He gave the title to Mountbatten. He said Mountbatten is an amphibian monster. And when Mountbatten's forces landed in Singapore, the first thing that they did, and those were done by our own Indian soldiers, not the Brits, they, against military protocol and traditions, they blew the INA memorial. It is against all civilized practices to blow up memorials. They put dynamite and blew up the INA memorial. And that is unacceptable in any tradition. So with that kind of conflict, if Netaji had come back to India, there would be no position for Mountbatten. And the funny thing is that we still call him Lord Mountbatten, whereas every Indian should call him Lord Pandit Mountbatten, because the slogan that came out at the close, I'm not joking, this is not a joke. The slogan with which the Constituent Assembly closed was Pandit Nehru ki jai and Pandit Mountbatten ki jai. So our first lawmakers called him Pandit Mountbatten because he was going to take over as the first viceroy. And so there would be no Pandit Mountbatten and Pandit Nehru sitting in Shimla and figuring out how to do the transfer of power. That was kind of a palace coup. That was not what Congress itself had envisioned for all these decades, for all these years. Congress was a platform for mass movement which Gandhiji had built from 1917 onwards, because it was Gandhiji who brought politics to the mass and brought the mass into politics. So the moment you take that to the Viceregal Palace in Shimla, you are actually denying the entire tradition of mass politics which was built up by Gandhiji. And so, I mean, these are nuances which it has to be, these are not points which can be, thrown at your debate opponent in TV studios. But there are deeper meanings. You have to understand the currents and the cross currents of all these.
This is a never-ending discussion and very interesting. But we have to end the session. So on behalf of the foundation, I would sincerely thank Chandrachur Ghose for yet another wonderful and engaging evening. And a warm thank you to Professor Sharma for your wonderful and on-point moderation. We are grateful to Oil India Limited for their continued support, and a warm thank you to you as well, to Vivanta Guwahati. And lastly, we extend our heartfelt thanks to all our esteemed guests. India's cultural landscape is shaped by the many traditions and communities that come together to form its unique identity. To honor this diversity and as a gesture of appreciation for our rich artistic heritage, we are pleased to present Dokra as a small but meaningful token of our gratitude to the author and the conversationalist. I would now like to request Mr. Himanshu Yadav to please come and felicitate author Chandrachur Ghose with Dokra. And also I would like to request Mr. Krishnanjan Chanda to come and felicitate conversationalist Professor Sarma. Thank you so much. You all can take one book. The author will be happy to sign the book. Thank you.
And thank you, Anindita ji, for this opportunity. And also thanks to Prabha Khaitan Foundation for initiating this conversation. And hope to have many conversations in the coming days and equally engaging audience like you. So thank you so much and have a wonderful evening ahead. Thank you.
तोरे नैना बड़े चित चोर काहे झूठी बतियां बना